Hey folks, welcome back. I'm David. We're here in my shop where I build Ewor guitars. This is going to be episode number 8 of the series where we're building this Fender Meteora shaped guitar. I'm going to do, of course, double humbuckers. We're going to do a tune-o-matic type bridge. We're doing a set neck, and we're doing some other cool things. We're doing this inlay on it, so it's very different than a Fender Meteora, but the general shape is that, and I really dig it. I love an offset guitar, and I really dig this one here. So anyway, that's the guitar we're building. And if you all been following along with this series, you'll know that last week we got our scarf joint done in this neck. We've got it cut, glued back on, and we've got it surfaced off, and we even did the thicknessing of the back side of the headstock. And we are ready to roll on with some more work on this neck. So we've got some milling and machining work to do on the neck for the truss rod, the tuner holes, the outside perimeter shape, and all that stuff. And we've also got to do our fretboard, which is what I think I'm going to put this video towards, is that fretboard. So I'm going to use this piece of Zero Coat I have left off of when we did our body inlay here. This is a beautiful piece left off, and I think I'm going to take the fretboard out of this side right here to where we have those two different colors going down the middle of the fretboard. I think that's going to look pretty cool. And incidentally, and I've also got this piece, which is a very thin piece I'm going to use. Well, it's not that thin, it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. This is going to be our headstock cap too, so before we're finished with this neck, we're going to cut up some of this too and glue it onto the headstock. But for now, we're going to work on this, fretboard. So I've been monkeying around. I've never totally made a fretboard 100% on a CNC machine before, so I've been doing a little prototyping this past week. I finally got my fret slots to cut all the way through without breaking a bit. These are some tiny little bits. Let me see if I can show you one of these guys. You see the size of that little thing? That's 23 thousandths of an inch is that the point of that bit, and it breaks real easy. And I think I finally got my tool paths set, my speeds and all that set properly to cut it. And this is a piece of bird's eye maple, which is a heck of a lot softer than a piece of Zero Coat here. But I hope it's still going to work. I've got it running really slow and taking out just 10 thousandths at a time, so I hope that's going to work. And I've also been fooling around with some different type of fret markers here, and I think I've got something kind of interesting going, and we're going to give that a shot too. So anyway, I'm ready. I think the first thing we got to do is get going on this. We're going to have to rip this down, get it to the right thickness, or the right width rather. We're going to go to 3 inches for my blank, and I'm still a bit thick, so we're going to have to surface this down in the CNC machine and get ready to go. So anyway, why don't we take this over to the bandsaw, we'll rip it down and get rolling with it right now. Okay, so for the first CNC operation I want to do is I want to surface off the back of this thing. I'm going to do the surfacing on the back because that's the last time that thing is going to be touched until it gets glued on, because the top is going to get radiused and all that other stuff. So I want to make sure that back is perfectly flat and straight and there's no deviation in the surface. And I also want to make sure I have an exact 1/4 of an inch thickness, which I'm just a little bit more than that right now. So anyway, I'm going to glue this down there, and I've got some surface tooling paths laid out now that'll take off 10 thousandths of an inch at a time, and I'm going to do that till I get it down precisely to 1/4 of an inch. So, and this is the bit I'm going to use for it. It's a 1-inch surfacing bit. It's a 3-winged thing. It's got it's made for spoil board surfacing or surfacing such as this. So anyway, that's the bit I'm going to use. So we're going to get this guy glued down here with the back facing up, and we're going to start milling away. Okay, so the first operation we're going to do on the face side of this thing, because I want to get this out of the way, I want to find out if this is going to work or not. But if you can see, let me try to hold that up there for you. If you can see that bit, that is a tiny, tiny little cutting portion of this bit. It's 23 thousandths of an inch thick, and I've broken a bunch of these things. Trying to figure out how to set the speeds and the depths and all that kind of stuff to make it work. I think I finally got it. That last one worked out good. I'm going to cut the total depth of these fret slots at 1/8 of an inch. It's going to do it at 10 thousandths of an inch at a time, which means it's going to be taking 13 passes on each fret slot. I could certainly do this quicker on my table saw, but one thing I like to do, or one thing I want to be able to do, is if I could use a CNC machine, I could cut these fret slots where I'm cutting them shy of the edge of the fretboard. So I could hide the fret tang without putting binding on the fretboard, which I think is pretty cool. So that's what I want to try to do. We're going to do our best to get this thing cut without breaking that bit. If it does break, I'm going to take it off. We're going to cut it on the table saw and put it back on for the rest of the operations. But anyway, so there's a little 23 thousandths of an inch bit. Let's get it set up and get running on those fret slots. Okay, so that's as far as I got before I broke another bit. I'm really disappointed. I'll be honest with you, I broke 2 bits. The first one I broke, I left the settings at 20 inches per minute with the fit for the cut rate and 15 inches per minute for the plunge rate, and which is exactly what I used on that maple fretboard, and it seemed to work okay. So I tried that and said, doggone it, I should have slowed it down a little bit because I'm cutting 0 coat and it's a heck of a lot harder than maple. And so I slowed it down to 15 inches per minute on the travel speed and 10 inches per minute on the plunge rate, which, and I actually increased the passes from 13 to 14. So it was taking out less than 10 thousandths of an inch. It ramped in over a ½ inch length of time, and then cut, like I said, 14 passes, less than 10,000. And there's the piece that broke off. And the interesting thing is, it seems to break when it gets to the last pass. So I'm going to try to dig it out of here because I'm going to have to cut this on my table saw. It cuts at the, as it's pulling out, there it is right there, see it? There's that bit that broke off. It's right at the very end of the cut. That's after it went its entire 1/8 of an inch deep, and it's about to pull out and do the next one. Let me see, I don't know if you could see that little piece, but that is it right there. It's like a needle. Anyway, that's pretty disappointing because I know a lot of guys get this right and they do it and repeatedly, and they don't burn up bits like I do. Those bits are 43 bucks a piece. And I can't keep breaking them like that. I can't afford that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put this on my table saw like I've always done. We'll show that here in a second. I'm going to hopefully get this lined up exact because this is the piece I want to use. I don't want to have to just toss this. So hopefully I can get it lined up really well where I could recut these slots and then cut all the rest of them on that, and then come back, stick it back on the CNC machine and finish up the rest of the operations. So anyway, let's go on over to the table saw and get going on that right now. Okay, so I'm set back up here at my table saw. I've got my little, my sled here, and I've got my old reliable, this Stumac blade here that I've cut many fretboards with. And then I've got the one that I started cutting. Now I'm gonna learn this CNC machine. I'm gonna get it right on the CNC machine, but for the time being, this is going to have to be good enough. So what I did was I took and I laid this in on top of my sled here with the blade sticking up, and I put that right in the blade. I put that last slot right in the blade, and I have a little reference line on my inside this sled here that I line up these notches on my StewMac guide, and so I determined the exact distance between the center of that fret and my and the mark on my deal here, which happened to be 33/64 of an inch. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this this fretboard and I'm going to line this line up, okay, which should put that, you know, when that line's on that notch, it should put my 18th fret right in that right in the saw blade. So anyway, so I'm going to use some double-sided sticky tape. I'm going to flip this guy over here, so I've still got that fret mark marked. I'm going to glue that. I'm going to stick that right down on top of there. Now I'm not going to cut the two ends. I'm not going to cut either end of the fretboard. I'm going to let my CNC do that. We're just going to simply use this to cut our frets. So hopefully I'll get this lined up really well, because if it's not exact, it will never be right. So hopefully I'll get this lined up really, really well, and we'll get moving on again. Okay, so I think that came out. Well. I didn't bother recutting these original few slots down in here, but I cut the rest of them all. And I went back to my original. This is my original template I made quite some time ago, a few years ago, for a 25-inch scale length. And I checked it out, and they line up and they match, going from the ones I did to the ones that the CNC machine did. Now all I got to do is get this guy back on the CNC machine, lined up with my XY0 precisely in this corner, and I should, because it's marked on there. I should be able to get that lined up well, so then we ought to be able to carry on with the rest of the operations on this fretboard and have everything turn out just wonderful. So I'm sure somebody out there knows what I did wrong, or the speeds, or whatever's going on with this thing. But please, by all means, if you do know, how about you message me and tell me. And when you tell me, I'll go ahead and tell everybody else, to kind of, in case this can help out somebody else. So anyway, so let's go ahead and get this fretboard back onto that CNC machine and carry on. Okay, so let me see if I could show you where I'm at here with this. So these are the, of course I've cut my fret markers. That was a 1/16 inch upcut spiral bit I used to cut those. And I basically just cut a long horseshoe into the thing. And so now the fretboard's going to cut off somewhere around here. So my thinking, the way I did this, is I'm going to have two little small squares on the edge of my fretboard at each one of these fret markers. And even at the 12th fret, they're going to be slightly different. And that's going to be my side dot markers. And then I've got this part here on top, this horseshoe on top, that I'm basically is going to be my face markers. But I wanted to do something a little different than this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill a little hole, a 3/16 hole at the end of each one of these guys right here, and drop in this little piece of brass tube I have. And I think that'll be pretty cool. So I'm going to drill that, put this little piece of brass tube in there, and then fill the whole thing with black epoxy, and I think that'll look kind of cool. So anyway, I just wanted to take a second and tell you that. Now, before, my original intention was to cut these, fill them with, let's say, black epoxy, and then come back after that was hardened, then drill the brass ring, and then fill this with a different color. But the more I think about it, I just think black will look cool with a brass ring somewhere near the end. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do, and let's go ahead and move on with that now. Okay, so let me show you what we got here. So we've got our slots, and we've got our 3/16 hole, and I've got all these little brass guys driven down into those holes, and I've then filed off the top, so we're fairly flush. We're going to use a CNC machine to do the final radius into this thing, which will cut them to that radius after all anyway. But that's where we've got, and I blew out the holes and everything's cleaned up really good. So now what I want to do is I want to mix up some of this epoxy, and I'm just using this clear weld. This is a J-bead. It's like a 5-minute epoxy. It's nothing fancy. I get it from Home Depot, and I've done this type of thing before, and it works pretty good for it. And I also have some of this this tinting. This is it's a pigment. It's a black tinting pigment, and I bought it to go with epoxy. So I think overall it's all going to work out pretty well. So let's go ahead and get this stuff made. And this has a mixing, the 2 tubes, it mixes it on its way out. And I'm going to mix quite a bit more than we need. Because that's how I am. Okay, so I think that came out pretty cool. The black went in there. I did it last night. I let it set up overnight, and I think I've got it filled in good. A couple looks like it's kind of sank down in the holes a little bit, but we'll see. So the next thing I want to do in this is I want to do our 12-inch radius, which I'm going to run a what they call a molding tool path off of V-carve, and I'll show you that in a second once we get going on this. But that's what we're going to do, and we're going to use this bit right here, which is a ball nose end mill. It's a 1/4-inch ball nose end mill, and that's basically going to travel back and forth along the length of this thing and just step over just a couple of thousandths at a time and work its way all the way around, and it's going to cut the radius on this. So let's get that bit installed in there and get rolling on this right now. Okay, so I think that came out really great. I love it. I've got a couple little pinholes. There were air bubbles in that epoxy when I went through, but I think that's going to come out. I'll fill those before I give it the final sanding. I got an excellent 12-inch radius on this thing. I checked it. It's beautiful all the way through. Now I've got some tiny little milling marks that are just 1 or 2 thousandths apart all the way down the thing. It's very smooth and good radius, but it will need about a 220 sanding. And so after this thing is glued on, before I put in the frets, I'm going to sand it with probably 220, 320, maybe even 400. I'll sand it until that brass shines up really nice, and then we'll stop there, and I'll put some boiled linseed oil on the top. But anyway, our last operation as far as the CNC goes is we're going to cut this profile out. And for that, I'm going to use my 1/8 inch. This is an upcut spiral bit, an end mill, and it's going to cut out our final shape. And I'm pretty excited. I think this thing is looking really good. And I love it with the little brass dots in there. And I used black for my epoxy because I wanted to kind of stick with the colors that were already in this guitar, and I was already working with it. And I think when this thing is really polished up to sanded up to a high smooth finish, you're going to see just a tad of a difference between the black that's in the wood itself and the black epoxy, and I think that's going to be really super cool. So Anyway, let me get this bit change out. We're gonna get this guy cut out. Okay, I think that came out looking pretty good. So now for the moment of truth, to see if I got it back on that machine lined up right, let me set my fret markers or my fret slots in line. The big deal is the nut line in line with my pattern. And it is. I've got an excellent layout with the nut off of the first fret, and I've got great layout on all these fret slots all the way through. And it's a tad different on length on the end, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. So I'm very happy. I think this thing came out nice. All right, guys, well, that is it. I think that joker came out really cool. I'm really liking that. And I'm learning how to do a little more embellishments or whatever on the fretboard to kind of doll it up a little bit. And every time I try something new, and it looks cool to me. So anyway, I'm very pleased, and I think it's going to look great on this neck. I think that fretboard's going to look good, and I'll probably even do a little light dark laminate underneath the neck, or underneath the fretboard, or on top of the neck before I put in the truss rod and stuff. So anyway, I think that's going to look pretty cool, but that'll have to be for the next video. Anyway, I enjoyed doing this. I hope somebody got a little something out of it. And if anybody knows about that bit breaking thing on trying to cut these fret slots, please let me know. I would love to find out how to do it right without busting bits. At 43 bucks a piece, they get pretty expensive. Anyway, hope you all got a little something out of this. Hope you have a wonderful week. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next one.